All right, the button's been pressed. We are live. Hello there, everyone. Welcome to episode 97, I think, of Tapcaf Transmissions, the only Star Wars podcast currently thinking about what our vision of the future is going to be. But I am your host, Corey, and shaking it up, we have special guest EckhartsLadder here as the second host. How are you doing, Justin?
I'm good. I figured I'd take some time out of my busy day to guest on the only Star Wars podcast around.
You have no other options, yeah. So
other options.
this or nothing.
People keep trying to tell me to hit the podcast circuit, and I'm like, it's not really a circuit if there's only one.
Yeah, close circuit.
It's like a podcast point.
Well, how are you doing this fine week?
I'm doing well. No big complaints. Not a whole lot of news compared to last week. We did get a new Old Republic trailer that was pretty cool, but
Yeah, that was pretty epic.
Yeah, not a whole lot. How about yourself?
I've been very busy because I had to fit in about 3 trillion pages with other stuff I had to get done, getting ready for the Fall of the Republic release coming next week, the only Star Wars content about to be released. Suffering from any Book of Boba Fett's withdrawal, or have you been managing?
I mean, I had 26 hours of audiobook to listen to, so yeah, I've been pretty busy as well. Too busy with the nice voice of Mark Thompson in my ears to really think about Book of Boba Fett. But yeah, I definitely missed it.
Well, it'll only be a few months until we have Kenobi, and question mark amount of time until we have Bad Batch, because they haven't seen fit to let us know what decade to expect that in.
So it could be coming before Kenobi, it could be coming after. I think my guess is they're going to do a split season with half, or like how many, what was season 1? Like, was it 18 episodes, 12 episodes?
I think it was only like 12, 10 or 12.
Yeah, so let me see. Bad Batch season 1. My guess is that they're going to do half the episodes before Kenobi, and then there were 16 episodes.
Oh,
it was pretty good considering the first one was like what, an hour and a half.
Hour and a half, yeah.
Yeah, so I think they'll do 8 before and 8 after Kenobi.
Okay, so a nice Kenobi sandwich. I could see that.
Mm-hmm.
All right, you've heard it here first, folks. We are confirming, based on our speculation, that we are going to get 8 episodes of The Bad Batch before Kenobi. And if we're wrong, then who cares?
Yeah.
Find something better to care about. Yeah.
Listen to another Star Wars podcast.
Oh yeah, you can't.
You can't. There's only one.
Right, well, any other news that did come out? I guess there's on top of the trailer, we got the announcement of the Han and Leia book covering their marriage or their wedding
on the Galactic Star Cruiser.
Well, their wedding isn't on the Galactic Star Cruiser.
No,
it's on the honeymoon is. So let's try to get our facts straight first off. But you did a video covering your own displeasure with this choice.
And honestly, I felt a lot of this displeasure already from Galaxy's Edge with Batu. And like, I'm okay with there being tie and stuff. Obviously, Star Wars is always a tie and stuff, but all the Batu stuff for me felt like pretty transparent marketing for the park, and I felt like the content was worse off. And everyone is saying correctly, listen, you haven't read the book yet, it could be amazing. And yes, it could, but I don't get good feelings when the first paragraph is talking about how it's, a park tie-in, basically.
Yeah. And at least part of it is also that, like, Galaxy's Edge, I've never been there, I'll probably never go there, but at least it's somewhat reasonably accessible for people. This is a tie-in for something that, like, no one can afford and was already kind of disliked or very disliked or not well received beforehand, where from what I've heard, the Galaxy's Edge book tie-ins were at least somewhat okay, and I'm not saying the new book can't be good, just that it's starting from such a disadvantage of being so heavily tied into this thing that is already coming with a lot of baggage.
Yeah, and like, I'm sorry, I just don't know if it makes sense for the story Han and Leia, after Endor, or they're going on a cruise. I mean, but yeah, it's if you want to take a family of 4 on a weekend trip to the Galactic Star Cruiser, it's 6,000 American dollars
Yeah.
for
Like
2 nights.
the Pirates of the Caribbean started like it went downhill, but it started off as a movie that most people I think have a positive impression of, and it's a
Mm.
tie-in based off of a ride. It's not that these things can't be good, but
Yeah, that's
there's
true.
nothing in the movie that makes you think this is telling me to go to Disneyland. It's
Right.
just the jumping off point for it, whereas
In
it
fact,
seems like that might not be quite as much the case here.
yeah, most people who like most kids who grew up with Pirates of the Caribbean being movies would probably assume that the ride, which is really cool by the way, it's not really a ride, it's like an experience,
Yeah.
is based off of the movie, not the other way around. Um, but yeah. Um, yeah, Galaxy's Edge is cool, and I mean you're right, it is accessible. If you go to Disney, you get to go to Galaxy's Edge. It's not, you don't pay extra for it. It's not like some gated off thing. It's just, part of the park. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's just,
So
I don't know. It feels like they've kind of hit some missteps with this, I guess.
yeah, like as annoyed as I get with people who will automatically shit on anything that comes out of Disney just because it comes out of Disney. Like I have no love for Disney as a corporation. I think it sucks, but that doesn't mean that anything that comes out of it is going to be
Hmm.
shit. Like it just so happens that the company that has all the money in the world and has bought up every media outlet is going to be the one that is paying the people to make the things that you probably enjoy
Hmm.
anyways. But there's also been this reflexive backlash the other way where like anyone who says this tie-in is kind of uncomfortable for them or isn't something they're into is like, well, what do you
Yeah.
expect Star Wars? That's like, can we at least try to have some sort of reasonable middle ground here? And I hate doing the both sides thing, but
Hmm.
this is a situation where it's like, can we not criticize the mega corporation without it always having to be
Yeah.
just
I,
automatically
I
shitting
I
on
get a
them?
lot of that because I'm pretty vocal about certain aspects of like, and I get lumped in with, the hating everything Star Wars, which I don't hate
Yeah.
everything Star Wars at all. Like, people were saying that I'm a huge hater of the Book of Boba Fett now, and like that couldn't be further from the truth. Like I was way more defensive of that show than anyone else, but or than not anyone else than most people rather. Um, but yeah, like I agree. There's criticism when warranted shouldn't be written off as toxic fandom or whatever,
Yeah.
especially when, listen, I'm not calling the author a slime ball or anything. I'm saying I don't necessarily like how this multi-billion-dollar corporation is conducting itself.
Yeah. Like they seem to be very excited to be writing a Star Wars book, and I don't think it's inherently going to be
Hmm.
a bad book. It has every opportunity to be good like anything else, but it's starting with this with a premise that does give it some extra lifting to do to get out of being perceived as only existing to be a tie-in. And it's kind of tying the author's hands into telling this story a certain way that
Yeah.
doesn't like we'll have to see what it ends up like how much ends up feeling forced or not. Like again, it
Hmm.
could turn out being a good book, but
Maybe the book is
uh
so good they made the ride after it.
yeah, there you go.
I'm
But
joking.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, I think another thing that is kind of unfortunate is that, for one, it's announced literally a month after Dave Wolverton's death.
Yeah.
Um, and there's also the fact that like the Course of Princess Leia is a really well. It's like, if there's anything you can say about that book, it has issues as we talked about when we covered it, but it's very like genuine. It's got a lot of heart. It doesn't feel like corporate. It's like a silly fantasy adventure with night witches and
Oh,
rancors
did
and
you never visit the Dathomir Park experience at Disney World?
yeah, I got where you get beat up by a woman wearing a what do they call it again? The what's the thing that
The lit
Tarzan wears? The loincloth?
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that was my favorite part of that. I went on that a million times as a kid. But yeah,
If
it's
anyone asks
just,
you if you want to ride their Rancor, just say no.
yeah, just say no. Yeah. Especially if it's just some random dude in the bathroom. It's. But with that being said, I also did want to mention too. Apparently, there's been some news from Variety, so not
But you're
your
gonna say Verizon. I
no,
don't know why.
maybe
I was like, oh, we're talking about the Verizon news. I was sure of it, but
no. Variety says John Williams will be scoring Kenobi, or at least doing the
hmm,
theme for it. So that's, the man's 90. Like,
yeah. I really thought we wouldn't be getting any more John Williams Star Wars, and I'm really excited to get more. So
hmm,
great.
yep. Yeah, so
But it'll
cool.
probably be very different from what we've got with other shows recently, where uh, that's gonna do a different but still pretty Star Warsy style. So it'll be
Yeah.
nice to get the maybe more of an original feel to some of it too.
Yeah, I will say too, the it feels like, as somebody who, I'm pretty into like the Star Wars leaks, like I'm not a person who minds being spoiled at all. Um, it, for well, that depends. If something's out, I like to see it without being spoiled. But like, I enjoy the process going like of
Yeah,
when something's coming out. And I will say, compared to the Book of Boba Fett and the Mandalorian, it feels like there's a lot of details about the Kenobi show coming out, like kind of some fairly major plot points. So if you're someone who's averse to those things, you just be very careful. And you can kind of tell, like, certain Star Wars productions are leak proof, like The Last Jedi had nothing.
yeah,
Um, Whereas like The Rise of Skywalker was leaked 6 months in advance, pretty much the entire script.
yeah.
Um,
Ironically, though, Last Jedi was the only one I got spoiled on because I saw it after release by
mm.
and got spoiled by people on Steam putting uh what was it?
There was a
Uh
sentence that someone on 4chan made that just
yeah,
like Luke Skywalker dies,
and Kylo Ren kills
Kylo
Snoke.
kills Snoke,
Like,
becomes Supreme
not to
Leader.
spoil
Yeah,
this for anyone else, but someone logged in on Steam. It was like doing the thing where they'd spam go offline online so everyone on their friends list would see their name. And I was like, what the fuck, dude?
yeah, like you used to do on MSN back in the day if your crush was online and you wanted her to talk to you. That, like, there's a lot of our listeners are just going to be completely like, "What the fuck's MSN?"
What are these
MSN was the
boomers?
MSN was the best. Nothing better than coming home after a long day of school, turning on MSN and just it's just like an online party. It's the best.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Had your name, your statuses. People could put whatever edgy shit they
Yeah.
wanted under their display name.
Sometimes she won't know what she's got until it's gone. And then there'd be like,
She paved
uh,
paradise to put up a parking lot.
yeah, there'd be like X's of different like capitalization. There'd be like tildes or whatever those are called. Just like, I would see like people who could do that. I was like, how do they have this much? How do they just know how to make these cool status designs? And then I remember if you got like MSN Plus, you could like have your song, like your music
Yeah.
auto show up. That was so sick.
And like you'd always know who's in a relationship because it's like everyone would change their thing to ILU,
Loves Jessica,
and then
loves Jordan.
well, you know it's really serious if they do ILUSM. So
Yeah, especially if it's all lowercase.
yeah,
Yeah,
little heart. But
yeah.
anyways, this
Mm.
week we are talking about when Luke and Mara set their
I
relationship
was gonna say
status on
this is
MSN.
appropriate because Luke and Mara's relationship development is very much like this. Luke, this
Yes,
is for all those for the Luke's not an incel group. This book's a major L for you.
yes. Even though he does end up married to Mara Jade, he does some questionable things, we'll
Yeah,
say,
yeah.
and yeah. So
Let's just
we'll
get
get
that out
that.
of the way first. So, because I think we both want to talk about this. There's a scene where Mara sustains a blaster wound, and Luke puts her in a Jedi trance, and then he leans over. What does he do? Does he stroke her forehead? A little weird, but acceptable. Does he touch her hand? Does he? He gives her a kiss. And I know you're thinking, oh, he probably gives her a little kiss on the cheek or maybe the forehead, something like kind of at least somewhat platonic. Still a little weird, but no, he kisses her straight on the lips.
Yeah,
She's asleep.
you
He
don't
put her to
don't
sleep,
do that.
and then he's got his hand across her chest, and it's just like, buddy. I just imagine like later, where I just like imagine like for the next like 30 years, or I guess they're not married for that long. But while they're married, Luke's just like hoping she doesn't find out, and like every time like Mara makes some like oblique reference to their first kiss, he's just like starts sweating. He's like, yeah, like she's like, I really loved our first kiss, the one on Near one. He's like, yeah, the one on Near one. He's like, does she know? Like, what do I say?
Yeah, which one? I mean,
Yeah, that
and
was great. Yeah, you were awake for. Yeah, you were awake. I just making sure.
and then of course, right after establishing the relationship, he does propose. She says yes, but it's an immediate proposal right after they start dating. Of course, this is a whole force-powered relationship where they've now been inside each other's heads, and what the fuck up, Justin? And so that moves you along a few months, like how relationship duration in COVID was worth about 3 times as much. Like if you start living with someone
Mm-hmm.
in COVID for a year, that's worth
Mm-hmm.
actually 3 years. If you're a
Yep.
Jedi, apparently you get an additional 5 years to your relationship right off the top. And that's why we are actually getting a Luke and Mara wedding, which we're going to be covering with the Union comic next week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a little spoiler alert there. Yeah, so the relationship is definitely sudden. One thing that I had a bit of issue with though is like Luke's big hang up is that like she may have dated Lando for a
Yeah,
bit. Like, so what?
yeah.
Lando's hot. Like
I feel like
Lando.
it does reinforce a lot of I guess especially like teenage boys' ideas of like they can't
Mhm.
have dated anyone before me.
Yeah,
It's
she's
like, can
got
we
to be
just
like the virgin, like unsullied. Like it's, I think she's a woman. Like she's what 40 at this point, late 30s. Like
yeah, if it had turned into like, oh, I thought like you were still had something with Lando and that's why I'm
yeah.
standoffish, then she's like, oh well, maybe a bit for a while ago because we had all this time hunting card, but or hunting card ass,
Mhm.
but it's
Yeah, she's 36 at this point. Like Luke, like I hate to tell you, buddy, but she's probably at least kissed a fella before.
well, what if her first kiss ever was when she was in a Jedi healing trance that she just doesn't ever find out about? Not okay.
Yeah, no, it's not great.
Consent, people.
Yeah, consent for sure. Um, and it's just I really like this book, but there were a few times where like I definitely felt like Timothy Zahn was going out of his way to explicitly rebuke everything that happened to
Yeah,
his characters that he didn't like. Like not only okay, so for those who don't know, it's in the Jedi Academy trilogy, I believe.
yeah.
Um, where or no, is it?
It's
It's
Corellian
not. It's
trilogy.
no,
Well, no.
It's Callista. It's when they're on the. Isn't it before they go on the Eye of Palpatine, where he calls
When
her and she's with Lando? Anyway, it's one of
is it
those.
that the scene they talk about, right? Where Han
Mhm.
calls her and she's like
She's
holding up
wearing.
Lando's sweater. And now
She's
Timothy
wearing a
Zahn,
shirt. Yeah.
yeah, Timothy Zahn sets up this whole fucking elaborate backstory
And then
about how she
also, yeah, he sets up well because he basically sets up on like the idea that Lando and Mara were traveling undercover and posing as a couple. Like, okay, fair enough. And then he explicitly has to also debunk that exact moment.
yeah. Like
Which,
we gave Zahn credit in the last one where we were like, oh well, you really expect going into his Zahn book like he's not going to really bother with other people's shit. But now what
mhm.
we learn is like, no, he was only doing that so he could say none of that was a thing because he does that a
Yeah.
lot. That's just the
And
biggest example there.
did you also feel like he was taking a little bit of a shot at some of the other writers, how they wrote her as well? Where
Yeah,
she's like, yeah, like I was just I had to pretend to be this ditz for a while to everybody.
yeah,
I was like, okay, like I didn't think she was written that poorly compared to how she usually is.
yeah. I think there was anyone who who isn't Michael Stackpole or Aaron Alston kind of gets a bit of a shaft here from Zahn.
hmm Yeah, yeah. I mean, I guess the Black Fleet Crisis gets a bit of like it gets a bit of references, but no shots against it because
I
what are you
don't
really gonna say about the Black Fleet Crisis?
I don't know that it is no shots against it because the top of the line warships that get introduced really only get references being used in planetary defense forces by the Diamala,
hmm
which I don't know if that's a slight.
I don't know.
Are we
I
making
don't
up
know.
our own version of the bullshit about like the Civil War at Lucasfilm?
Maybe no. I think we're definitely seeing some jostling back and forth.
Yeah,
Where like, and you can tell too that I feel like Timothy's on another thing that he was probably unhappy with, and I think rightfully so, was the degree to which a lot of like, let's be honest, most of the characters that were well, a lot of the characters that were really well loved in Star Wars Legends came from either Michael Stackpole or Timothy Zahn.
yeah,
Um, so like Talon Karr does largely get ignored. Like he does feature sometimes. It's even the same with Mara.
Yeah.
And in this, he's like, he reins them all back, and he's like, "There's a reason why these characters are so popular. Like now, guess what? Talon Card's the head of the intelligence agency. Good luck fucking around with him now." Um,
Well, there's kind of a there's two sides to that. Where on the one hand, it's like, yeah, he does put them in these prominent positions, and sometimes they get ignored.
mhm.
But he also doesn't seem to want people to do anything with them either.
I think his main problem might be that, and like this is another thing. He kind of critiques the overall like plot of like how Luke's been handled
Yeah.
um throughout Star Wars Legends, and like kind of to a greater extent really a lot of the stories that have been told
Well, Michael
where
Stackpole has the exact same scene too. Not exact, but like where Corrin does what Mara's doing,
Mhm,
where it's basically used to say the way that Luke has been handled so far has not been great.
mhm. Right, is that, you mean in I Jedi?
That's in yeah, an iJedi when Corrin's leaving, and they reference it here where
Mhm.
like Mara says, "Oh, I thought you'd be okay because Corrin's still there." And Luke's
Yeah,
like, "No,
I Jedi
he
gets lots
left
of
too."
references actually
Yeah,
because they talk about like some specifics anyway. um but yeah, so he's basically saying like Luke has been getting involved in just handling every little conflict and like not progressing when like that's that's really, I think, not something that a lot of the other writers are necessarily clued in on. And I guess that's kind of what happens when you have this sort of expanded universe being cobbled together by these individual writers who have their own little action stories they want to tell.
yeah. Like the
So
idea, especially early on, that a lot of it was supposed to be more interconnected, that was still developing. Like so many
mhm,
of these books were written within a few months of each other. So many of the books that are being referenced that like coordination would have been next to impossible. And it wasn't really until the late 90s where even in Bantam there was some more idea of that and some examination of what had come before. And especially when you get to NJO with Del Rey, where they actually got everyone into a room and planned out a 19 book arc for
mhm.
Long War.
Yeah, and I don't know. Yeah, it would have been nice. Part of me loves the band. Like this book makes me kind of sad because it is the end of like the Bantam era, which is kind of my favorite. Even though
Mm.
it feels like a lot of the time I'm complaining about individual books, it does end up kind of being my favorite, or at least an era that I really like for its own reason. So it is kind of sad that this definitely feels like a send off in a way, because it is a send off, because this is, we get Del Rey after this point. But
There's like trade-offs that you get there where like this more self-contained stories that are done the way the Bantam era tended to do them. You have well, the stories can be more self-contained, and especially if you're into some of the smaller scale stories, then you're going to get more of that than when you get into Del Rey,
mhm.
where there's kind of three galaxy-threatening stories in a
Yeah.
row. Plus, you have like the Millennium Falcon story, Crucible, Riptide, and Crosscurrent. But it's largely just everything's going to shit, and we're going to kill off everyone.
Yeah, I think what I like about the Bantam era is that it's a lot. They say this about hockey when you talk about why junior hockey, like before kids make it in the NHL, is so fun. It's because it's so like unrefined,
Yeah,
and like you see a lot of just raw creativity in how they play. And it's sort of like that with like the early Star Wars books too, where like I love them as a kid, the Bantam books, because I knew that you could pick these books up and like any number of wild and crazy things could happen,
yeah,
and that was kind of exciting. Like you pick up a book and Luke's on an asteroid that's actually a big space station, or you pick up another book and like we're learning about Luke's students. It just felt kind of like there was unlimited possibilities. And obviously, there's some negative to that because a lot of it ends up being corny or schlocky or whatever. But in some respects, that is kind of what I liked. But on the other hand, it is really nice to get the super concise books like the Thrawn Duology or the Thrawn Trilogy, or like we get with not concise but well connected books like the Legacy of the Force series or the NJO or whatever else.
yeah. And there has been some among the listeners some lamenting of the fact that we are at the end of the Bantam era here, but there are some books we skipped over that we can go
New
back to
Rebellion.
New
Yeah.
Rebellion. And so, while we are moving into Del Rey territory chronologically, there's still going to be some comparisons that we're able to get to with that.
Still lots of comics and stuff from that era as well, like the
Yeah.
X-Wing comics, for example. So,
And Survivor's Quest is kind of a Bantam Era style thing because it's Zahn
mm,
around the same time. Because that came out in
mm,
2000. I was checking this because I was a bit concerned about whether we were doing Outbound Flight and Survivor's Quest in the wrong order. But Survivor's
mm-hmm.
Quest did come out before Outbound Flight, so kind of going back and
Yeah, it's Outbound Flight. Like a lot of its Outbound Flight is like some reveals from what I remember that are kind of
yeah,
hinted at in Survivor's Quest.
yeah, it was kind of like much like Survivor's Quest itself. It was kind of setting up these things that then got turned into
Mm-hmm.
their own story. Because I think like Outbound Flight starts as just a mention, then it gets turned into Survivor's Quest of finding it, then you get the actual book about it.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's talk plot. Do you want to give a basic rundown of where we are right now? What's going on?
So as we start off in Vision of the Future, Thrawn is reportedly back. Mara has crashed on Nerowan. Han has Han left for no,
I
Han
was
and
just
Lando
trying to
haven't left
think
for
that.
Bastion.
No, I think
They were
don't
going to
doesn't he
Patrick in
leave
this
it?
book, weren't they? No.
Oh, no, yeah, you're right. Because the end of the book, kind of the end of the last book, I think, is them kind of getting ready to take a vacation. Maybe.
Yeah. But
Yeah,
it's hard to remember exactly where stuff leaves off because I
these
did
books
start this right
really.
after we ended the last
Yeah, me
podcast
too.
because
Me
it is
too.
a 700-page book. But broadly, Thrawn is reportedly back because of the triumvirate's plan within the Empire, being Moff Dizra, who's one of the leading Moffs, uh, Groden Tierce, who is a stormtrooper major, former Royal Guard, actually a clone, and the con artist Flim, who is posing as Thrawn. So the Empire is trying to incite more distrust in the New Republic, get other systems to join them, and kind of play off of the Kamas crisis taking place in the New Republic,
Mm-hmm.
where they're trying to figure out which Bothans were responsible for taking down a planetary shield. So the half the New Republic is saying, if we don't know, punish all the Bothans. The other half is saying, we don't know, please don't just kill all the Bothans.
Half the other, yeah, and it's tough because Bothans aren't likable.
They cover
And
that a lot.
realistically, they've done nothing to help their case because they covered it up.
Yeah.
They have also been lying about their finances, just generally. Like Bothans aren't good creatures. Like their reputation is always precedes them because it's like, yeah, they're Bothans, they're backstabbing dicks even among their own species, and then when you get Bothans interacting with everyone else, it's just like they're power hungry maniacs. So it's like the fact that it's the Bothans. Like if it was the Mon Calamari, things would maybe be a little bit different. But
Yeah, there's basically 5 different subplots in the book, which largely are about getting a copy of the Kamas crisis or the Kamas document, which would list all the Bothans responsible.
Mhm.
So you have Luke and Mara, who don't know that's what they're doing, but Mara's crashed on Nerowan after they chased these weird fighters to the planet. Uh, Luke has gone to save her rather than save the New Republic. Uh, Han and Leia are trying to vacation on Patrick, but then she gets pulled away by the chance to go for one of them to go to Bastion and slice out a copy, which Han and Lando do. Then Leia heads to Bothawai.
Mhm.
Pelion is trying to get to the middle or get to the bottom of all the shenanigans in the Empire. He's waiting for Garba Liblis wanting to make a peace treaty. So that's his kind of deal, and it's hard to summarize all the characters' plots because it is a 700-page book with a lot of different threads going on. But at the root of it
Mhm.
is basically a bunch of people imagining their own problems and having to deal with that rather than it being actually something external causing the
Mhm.
issue that they're going. That's it in a nutshell.
Yeah. So one thing that I kind of liked about this book was the triumvirate is pretty interesting. We get Flim, who is like far more capable than anyone gives him any credit for. Who's pretending to be Thrawn. We've got
Yeah.
Disra, who's just like absolutely miserable to be around. Just awful, just like cranky, like self-centered, just always bitchy. It's just awful. And then we've got then we've got Tierce, who is just like also very competent. But I found myself enjoying that kind of how they played off each other.
Hmm.
And yeah, Flim is like they're actually making moves. Like, yeah, obviously everything's a deception, but it kind of points out that even when there's someone's trying to emulate Thrawn, like they end up learning a lot by doing things that Thrawn did, like analyzing combat patterns, analyzing their enemies, what they would do. And I thought that was interesting.
Well, ultimately, what Thrawn's strength was in the initial book, and then gets kind of blown out of proportion as you go further in into like the legend of Thrawn in the galaxy, is that
Mm-hmm.
just him doing these minor things would make everyone second guess themselves and their allies, and ultimately what kind of undoes the triumvirate is that they stop even trusting each other and they're too in it for themselves.
Yeah.
So like the one thing, despite how everyone sees Thrawn as this infallible figure, and that's the problem with him being back that the New Republic sees, is like, oh God, what do we do
Yeah.
now?
Yeah.
There is one element that actual Thrawn does play in the book, where like
Mm-hmm.
the kind of one prediction Thrawn made, or the one promise Thrawn made, was to the Empire of the Hand, saying, in 10 years, if you've ever heard that I'm dead, wait 10 years and then I'll come back. And that turns out to be wrong, and all these protections he set up for the clone turn out to not be sufficient.
Yeah.
So even him as this infallible figure makes that mistake.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. The Empire of the Hand stuff was interesting. It's a bit frustrating to read it because you can tell that Timothy Zahn is kind of jostling with the fact that he wants to set things up, but what's coming is only sort of known to an extent. Like they knew there was some sort of invasion storyline coming,
Yeah.
but they couldn't go into specifics because they didn't know yet. I don't think,
Mhm.
and that ends up being a little bit frustrating because a lot of the conflict that Mara, like, sort of the conflict at the end that in the Mara and Luke storyline is because Mara eventually or essentially rejects the Empire of the Hand's request for her to join them, and they start off wanting to basically put her in a healing trance so they can kind of keep her captive, and it just kind of escalates from there. When it's just that doesn't really make sense, I don't think, because they haven't. For one, they kind of the Empire of the Hand sort of explains that Thrawn may not join the Empire if he comes back, but more than that, like the Empire of the Hand has real things they're worried about, and
Yeah.
I just don't think it makes sense for them to be shooting each other up. Like for one, I think it would have been more realistic for the Empire of the Hand just to let Luke and Mara leave because
Yeah.
if they know there's these big threats out there, and in hindsight, obviously they're talking about the Yuuzhan Vong if you look at kind of the lore, but also there's just lots of nasty stuff out there. You don't want your Jedi Master and his cutie pie GF to be killed.
Yeah. Like it ultimately hinges on Luke and Mara wanting to stop them from contacting Bastion, but like Luke and Mara also have to know, like, sure, you clogged up their hangar for 6 hours. You're not
One of
taking
their
down,
hangars.
yeah, you're not taking down this interstellar empire that you've now learned about
Exactly.
by taking out these three. Even if you did manage to kill them, which you're not trying to do, like it
Mhm.
doesn't make sense for either of them to kind of try to stop each other there.
Yeah, exactly. Like, and Mara flies her hangar into the Empire of the Hands facility, which was more, I guess, to stop them from being chased when they left the planet. But like, you're never going to be able to stop them from contacting Bastion because they've got thousands of worlds.
Yeah.
Like,
All they
they've
need to
got
do
an
is send a message to one of their other colonies, or even another thing on Neroon, because they probably have another base
oh
somewhere.
yeah, for
It's
sure.
like, hey, we're a little tied up here. Can you go and
They just text Thrawn, "You up?" Question mark.
one of the things that did bother me, so I always remembered the Luke and Mara subplot to be kind of a slog, but I liked it a
Hmm.
lot more this time. It actually might be my favorite subplot, weird Luke behavior aside. Because I
Hmm.
think the first time I read it, I didn't really have the context of Luke's behavior in prior books to kind
Hmm.
of understand why it might be interesting to examine it in that way. And that's what most of it is, Luke and Mara's behavior. But
Hmm.
my biggest problem, I think, with it is they're getting all this help from the Comke and Comja, or however
Hmm.
you pronounce them,
So the
and
audiobook calls him. Yeah.
uh, and it's like, oh, are you gonna help us with the threateners? Like, oh yeah, we'll try.
Yeah,
then
then they just don't at
afterwards,
all.
yeah, they never try to do anything. There's no way they're getting the fortress off the world.
Yeah.
And at the end, they're just like, uh, sucks to suck, I guess, to Child of
Yeah.
Winds. And at the end, like right at the end, when they're leaving, the Kamja or
They're just like, go. They're like, just go.
he's like, "We will help you get to your ship if you go the fuck away." And Luke
Yeah.
is like, "Yes, well, Child of Winds has earned a name, friend of Jedi." Like, why would you want to brand this kid with this
Yeah.
name of like friend of those dicks who didn't help us that time and got 3 of us killed?
Yeah,
What is
seriously. Yeah,
the
I
problem?
didn't think it was that bad of a section either. The one thing that was annoying to me is I was listening to the audiobook, and I will say Mark Thompson is amazing. Um, he does Han, C-3PO, and Thrawn especially. He does so well. I would have been legitimately happy if he had done Thrawn in Rebels. He's that good. But I actually would have preferred if he had done Thrawn in Rebels, and Thrawn in Rebels is great. But what was I saying? Oh yeah, when he does there's a few times where he takes it too far, and it's probably not his fault. But when the Quam Ja, he does it. He makes it sound like an avian, and he throws in like "Wah!" like every few words, like Luke Jedi. Wah! And it's just like it takes forever for him to get through any sentence. Probably why the friggin' audiobook's 26 hours long. Um, Another one that was kind of annoying is in the original Thrawn trilogy. Remember that Wookiee who speaks Basic?
Yeah, the one with the speech impediment, so he can like be
Yeah.
understood.
So he basically speaks like this, like it's like Luke Skywalker. There's like the whole time. So it's like anytime there's going to be a prolonged section with one of those people talking, it's just like awful. On the other hand, when you get somebody like Gaverson, he throws in these little like whinnies and bird. Like, he's like a cross between like a horse and a dove. So he'll be like, oh, he'll be like, call Admiral Akbar. It's just like it's hilarious.
The squawking Kamja is kind of weird because like I always pictured them, and I think the
Telepathically,
image,
yeah,
well, other than telepathically, I always thought of them more as like winged lizards.
yeah. I didn't. I was a little surprised when I looked at the image because I definitely pictured them more like I don't know. In my mind, I had them kind of like maybe a raptor, but like not a full lizard, like maybe a
They're a bit more
I don't know.
bat-like, like a mix between a bat and a lizard to me
Mm-hmm.
mentally. Because they're like the
Yeah.
cave dwellers, then you have the air dwellers. So I kind of pictured the outdoors ones more as a flying lizard, and the cave dwelling ones more as a bat. But
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I kind of pictured them as like what are they called? Like a vulture, I guess. But
mm.
yeah, yeah,
This time reading through, I don't know if you know what a Flygon is.
yeah.
In
The Pokemon,
Pokemon?
yeah.
Yeah, I was actually picturing them as that, and I just realized that for this read through.
That's yeah, that's not bad. That's not bad.
But yeah. So anything else you want to talk about with Luke and Mara? Because they are kind of a self-contained story until the end, and we've talked a lot about their portrayal. And
Mm-hmm.
Luke ends up thinking, or R2 ends up thinking of downloading the information, and they get the
Yeah,
only real
R2 once
copy
again.
of the Kamas
Yeah,
document. Not that it ends up
yeah.
being.
Yeah, I will say it just kind of reiterating a point that it's frustrating when they're talking about this great threat that's so great that that there's plans to for when Coruscant has been toppled and Mara doesn't ask what it is. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So he's like there's a threat out there that Thrawn wasn't sure even with him in command of the New Republic and Empire's joint forces we may not be able to defeat. And like if I were like Mara, I'd be like, okay, can you give me the basics at least?
Wow, that's
And
crazy. But then you're not giving this to Bastion, are you?
yeah, exactly. And it's like when when I see Thrawn in the tank, knowing what she knows now, I would have liked for them to kind of go into that issue a bit more of like, okay, maybe it's a good thing that Thrawn could still be alive because we might need him. Um,
Yeah, they do decide not to kill him until it becomes absolutely necessary, which is kind of the irony of what Thrawn had set up, is
mhm,
that he accounted for all these ways that people might try to kill his clone, and ultimately the thing that makes his clone die is that he set up all these things to protect it.
mhm,
Because they
yeah,
were about to just turn around and walk out of the room.
yeah, yeah. That's true. That's true. Um, yeah, I think moving on though, there are lots of clones in this book, and Lando is just straight up hateful towards them. Lando's like, clones, fuck you guys, like you got no soul, you're awful. And part of that comes from the fact that, and we get this quite a bit in this book, the idea of the Clone Wars was very different.
Yeah.
Where I imagine, like, I'm kind of wondering whether maybe George Lucas gave some kind of insight and just changed his mind later on, given the fact that kind of a lot of the authors seem to have a similar idea that there was some clone uprising basically that took the galaxy at storm. I do kind of wonder whether maybe George Lucas, that was his idea for a while.
Well, aren't there indications in, especially in like the scripts and screenplays, of that being the case? And even just the way that Obi-Wan talks about some of it does kind of feel that way. And like the timing before the Empire, like how far or how long ago the Clone Wars were going to be. They have the.
I don't. The only thing the only thing I really think about where we get any reference to the prequels would be like that prelude to A New Hope. But I don't think that just kind of talks about Palpatine's rise more than the Clone Wars itself, though.
I'm gonna grab a book here. Because I have the annotated screenplays. So maybe there'll be a note with.
That's a good. Yeah.
But yeah, like there is a very different portrayal of the Clone Wars, a lot of the early Bantam stuff. And there was actually something related to that in the Card and Cardass story, where Cardass is talking about how he found Yoda on the planet, and the timeline on it is very different, where like they're talking about Kim and Doriana, and this would have set, so Yoda was already stated to be on Dagobah here before Senator Palpatine started getting the power around him, rather than him being in exile out there. So it's kind of the idea we've seen in a few other places of Yoda just always existed out in Dagobah, and that Jedi were just these hermit monks that are around the galaxy doing their own things. Like when Luke is setting up this Jedi Order this way, it's kind of under the assumption that this is how the Jedi have already always operated.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting trying to see them piece it together, and that's one thing that obviously we haven't had in the new EU, and it removes some of the fun, but obviously it means that cohesive storylines are a lot easier to tell. But we also just kind of see generally like that, and you mentioned Kinman Doriana. That was one character that I'm kind of disappointed about, just in hindsight, never got more attention in the EU, because he's an interesting character, but he's one that like doesn't work well in like after the prequels come out, you know what I mean? Although, I mean, it's pretty easy to pick at one of the, like to choose one of the people that Palpatine stands next to in one of the movies, be like, oh yeah, there's Kinman Doriana right there. But he was one character, because like I remember he's in they get him in Plagueis, I believe, which was cool. And obviously he's in Vision of the Future, but beyond that, and the Outbound Flight, obviously, but beyond that, he doesn't really get a whole lot of attention, which is too bad, because he's an interesting character.
Yeah, like had to replace Kinman Doriana with Darth Vader, Grand Admiral Thrawn, and Mara Jade. Really overselling what he turns out to be.
Yeah, and that was another thing too. I can't remember which book is it where Mara discovers she wasn't the only Emperor's Hand. Was that in the Thrawn trilogy, or was that after? Was that when Luke meets what's her name? Fuck.
I think it was in the Thrawn
Children
trilogy.
of the Jedi. Okay, I could.
Because Thrawn tells her, doesn't he? He's like, you imagined you were the only one.
Yeah.
But there's a lot on this page that I just read that is pretty fantastic, but I'll just choose one thing here.
Okay.
You saw through me, Luke asks, and Ben replies, you could put it that way, giving a little hint that he has unusual powers. One of Lucas's early concepts had Jedi warriors letting out a shrieking scream each time they attacked. All that survived of this idea is encapsulated in the great howling noise Ben makes to scare the Sand People. There you go.
And in Palpatine's scream when he jumps and does the 720
like,
Mace Windu and co.
three things on that page that I found kind of hilarious, but need
I
to
gotta
read
pick
that
that up.
actual book.
Nothing on the Clone Wars though.
Didn't seem to be. There was like Ben Kenobi wrote a book, and that's how Luke knew about him. Ben Kenobi, the commander of the Thousand White Legions or whatever. But yeah, it was very different. But yeah, um, there was shit. There was something else I was gonna say about the Mara Jade stuff and the Thrawn stuff. Crap, I've forgotten it. Let's
I
keep
was just
going.
thinking of the other Emperor's hand we meet is in Children of the Jedi. The remember? Well, I can't
Yeah,
remember her
that
name.
no, that wasn't Quest. It was the Dast.
The
Yeah,
mother of what's his name?
yeah.
Yeah.
But crap, why can't I remember what I wanted to say? And now I'm upset about this. What else? What else is there that we should move on? Oh, no, the idea that Thrawn. So one of the things that Hellion keeps saying or keeps coming up with these ideas that like, oh, uh, Thrawn would never waste lives of his, would never be okay with throwing at the lives of his soldiers, or never waste life like that, or that he would never have a problem with someone doing the opposite of what he said if they didn't have the information to find out otherwise. But like Thrawn's whole shtick was like not telling people part of his plan.
Yeah.
And he killed the other guy
Yeah.
at the weapons station for being bad at his job once.
I will say though, he doesn't. He puts up with more questioning from Pelion and others than you might expect someone of his rank to. Like
Yeah.
in the original Thrawn trilogy, Pelion's always like, "But sir," like
Just shut up
someone's
and wait, Pillion. That's basically what he
yeah,
does most of the time.
yeah, and he
Like
does, yeah,
he doesn't throw away lives on assaults, but like the idea that he would be overly valuing of the lives under his command, like I don't know.
okay, fair enough. I think that's a fair.
At least as presented in the Thrawn trilogy, which gets
Mhm.
a little bit whitewashed along with the Empire by.
I think the Empire in this in generally gets a bit whitewashed. Like one thing that had me scratching my head was like when Pelion wants to search Disra's desk and the other guards like, we don't have a search order, that's illegal. Like, what are you talking about? Like last time I checked, the Empire had a security bureau which could just take you back and shoot you if they wanted.
Well, this was a Moff that they were searching.
But still, I never felt like there was anybody in the Empire up. I guess when the Emperor's gone, it's a bit different. But
Yeah,
I just never felt like any sort of procedural justice existed or
yeah.
any sort of
Well, Pelion
real
keeps
justice in any
saying
sense.
like, "Oh, this isn't the alien-hating Empire of Palpatine's day." But like they open it, and Pelion, like in Spectre of the Past, Pelion is also saying like, "Yeah, it kind of sucks that we'll have to deal with these alien lovers," and they even note how like it's unlikely to run into aliens on the Imperial capital, that kind of
Hmm.
thing. So it's definitely there in a lot more
Yeah,
areas
it's like
than
the
maybe
difference between
Pelion's just.
there may not be as many overt rules now, but it's still
Yeah.
the Empire. It's like, yeah, we're not saying no aliens, but you're gonna meet people who say no aliens.
Yeah. They've solved racism by not having the law anymore.
Yeah. Um. Yeah. I just thought that was funny. Another thing that I thought was funny was in, when Tierce is going down fighting, he just randomly punches a woman. I actually stopped and laughed out loud when I read that section because I had moved away. I was like trying to. I didn't have quite enough time to finish the audiobook, so I was reading it. And he just stops and just punches a woman. I think in like her stomach. Just imagine him like turning, shooting a bunch of stormtroopers, then just like, whoom, just like right in the. And she ends up being the Mistral Shadow person, but
Yeah. Wasn't gonna do much, but it's
still
I did
hilarious.
like
Just
with
like
that where
fuck
everyone's
this
like
woman in particular.
everyone's pointing out all the issues with these plans. He's like, so I can do it.
Yeah. He's like, I know I'm not epic, but I can still do it. So yeah.
Pelion had some low blows in there. Like he had,
Yeah. Yeah, we never really get the full kind of analysis of the ethics of being a dick to clones.
yeah.
Like because Lando doesn't like Han gets it a bit. Han's like, yeah, you guys are risking your lives for us, and like I fucked you over pretty much, and Lando's being a dick to you. It's like,
Well,
yeah,
yeah,
like
the reveal that like
shouldn't have been a clone.
Lando's they had every choice not to.
Mm-hmm.
Like Han, as the most understanding towards the Devis, is
Mm-hmm.
still a complete asshole to them until Elagos is like, "Now Han, you think you were being very epic right there? No,
No.
Elagos, I'll go say shall we?"
God, as much as I love Elagos, it would be a real pain in the ass to have him around.
Yeah, no one wants to be spoken to like they're a 2-year old.
Especially when he's right. Like, yeah, that's like when Charlie said that thing on the end of that Squadrons game that we won't repeat, and then and Wasted was just like, Charlie. That
Charlie.
was that was the Elagos Akla right there.
Wasted
If
is
you
like
don't
our
know, you don't know.
Elagos.
Yeah,
You don't know that you're in better shape than we are.
yeah.
This I have wanted to like kind of go through a lot of the books and just record anytime a price is given for something because I
Mm,
want to see how wildly it all varies.
a lot.
Because like
A lot.
card brokers the price of 18 million credits for buying the weaponry off of the errant venture when it becomes the errant venture.
Mm-hmm.
But there's some times where it'll seem like a million credits is a lot, and there's some
Mm-hmm.
times where it'll seem like 1 credit is a lot. Sometimes where a million is nothing, and then there's like the landing fee of 1,500 credits here, which is kind of extortion, but still. I just want to see how it all scales.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I think the only time credits are mentioned in the movies are, I mean, we get the Phantom Menace. I don't know if specific numbers are given, but in A New Hope,
Yeah,
um, where credits aren't 1-to-1, but they're pretty close. In which case, a Star Destroyer would be worth what, like trillions of credits, like
probably.
many trillions of credits. Um, but yeah, doesn't matter unless you're a nerd trying to play a tabletop RPG anyway.
Yeah. Well, that's what throws everything off because there's the pricing systems from RPGs. It's like, no, those only exist to be in the RPG, but then it gets recorded on Wikipedia, and then someone will comment on a video and be like, well, actually, a Star Destroyer costs 3 credits on a Thursday. And
Yeah. Or hey, did you know Venators carried 600 starfighters? No, I didn't know that because I've watched the Clone Wars and I've read every book with a Venator in it, and they're never described as having more than a dozen or a few
well,
dozen at least.
there's also a difference between like max capacity
Capacity,
and what you're usually
ordinary
going to be
use.
carrying. Because
Yeah.
technically, the hangars on an ISD would be bigger, just volume. Like we know how big these things are. You can compare them volumetrically. They'd be bigger than a Venator.
Yeah.
But the Venator, in the Empire, an ISD was deployed to a system as kind of watching over everything. You'd have like a base inside, you'd have the garrisons, you'd have years of supplies sometimes. You're not fully stocked for a war. I think that's usually the best way to kind of look at that. In the Clone Wars, there's usually you see more fighters and Venators, but that's an active war that ships are being deployed to go and just spew fighters at each other in,
Mm-hmm.
rather than essentially peacekeeping missions within friendly territory where you might see 3 people in the equivalent of a fucking Toyota Camry with a machine gun strapped to the top.
Yeah. Once that speak of Toyota Camry with machine gun strapped to talk, they talk about all these endurances and nebulas showing up, and then it's like 3 Star Destroyers are going to take out all the 100 ships in orbit there.
Yeah,
Annoyed me a little bit.
yeah, it was like
I just justified it as the bigger ships were, you know, they were
easy.
had been slagging each other and couldn't move as fast. But yeah,
There was what 300 to 400 ships that they had built up
there were a
on the New
lot.
Republic side, and then there was just the 3 ISDs, no support.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there were a lot.
Yeah, there were a lot.
I'm just looking at my notes here because we are unfortunately running a little low on time today already, which sucks. Although I guess we could always answer some questions next time if we do run low.
I went through the emails beforehand, unless we've gotten some more during the show, just to compile some stuff. I'm gonna go back to making a notepad with them. I don't know why I
Okay.
stopped that for future episodes. Just go it's a bit faster for us to get to the actual question in
Hmm.
the email rather than us stumbling through.
It was kind of cool how the book really seemed to take like all the Cathball Rift stuff, which I think is from the old West End Games
Yeah,
RPG. I'm pretty sure even the big crime lord was from what's his name again? The one that he goes to at the
recast
beginning.
or
Um,
Bombasa.
Bombasa, yeah. Like I'm pretty sure he was even a character in
Mm-hmm.
the Dark Strider campaign, maybe. So I thought that was pretty cool. Same with the Ang T. They are first from
Yangsty.
w- one of the RPG guides. I think Dark Strider, but yeah, I thought that was kind of neat. There are a lot of little references like that thrown in that you won't really appreciate unless you've read a lot.
Yeah, they're like a lot of the early books did basically just have the RPG stuff to work off of.
Hmm.
So like there was the thing about the X-Wing books where they actually originally got licensed as adaptations of the game, I think.
Hmm. Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I'll send you the interview. I think I have here it is. I actually have it pinned as my first bookmark right next to the KFC in Slough. Uh, so I'll see if I can pull that up while we're Bantam hit on the idea of taking a license out on the X-Wing computer game when Bantam looked through their stable of authors for someone who could write military science fiction. So yeah, it was originally the X-Wing books were licensed as licensed versions of adaptations of the X-Wing games rather than licensed on Star Wars itself necessarily.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. It's weird. So I kind of wonder whether they would have been considered canon. I mean, at all, or if they just would have been. I mean, probably, but
I've been meaning to make a video on this interview.
mm-hmm.
That's why it's pinned as my most important bookmark.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
What did you think of the idea of? So one of the things we get in this duology is a lot of Force talk, and specifically in this book, Luke kind of overusing the Force. And one of the quotes is that Luke, or that Mara says to Luke, is like, the more you use your raw power, the less you can hear from the Force for guidance. What do you think about that?
I think that's an interesting way of kind of pointing out the difference between the light and dark side, and it's one that kind of ties in pretty well with I think the way that Matthew Stover uses it in the Revenge of the Sith novelization,
Mm-hmm.
where you kind of see how Obi-Wan gets to be as powerful and useful as he is for the light side, despite not being like on the Anakin level of just raw power, because he's never acting out of his own desires. He's kind of the Jedi ideal of giving yourself over to the Force, and then whatever's supposed to happen happens through you. And I
Mm-hmm.
think the way Mara explains it here fits with that well. And I think uh, on the dark side, you're just trying to bend it to your will, and maybe you'll get better personal results in the short term out of that, versus the light side being kind of just
Mm-hmm.
acting as an instrument of the Force and letting it direct you.
I think they take it a bit far sometimes,
Yeah.
where Luke's like, Yoda could have just walked into Coruscant and killed Palpatine if he'd
Yeah.
wanted to. It's like, I don't think so.
No. And we see at the end of episode 3 how that's not going to work out. And there's a lot
Hmm.
of places where they try to address that. Like this idea
Hmm.
is also reflected in, I think, the Callista trilogy somewhere, where it's like actually yeah, like Yoda could have just fucking blown everyone up and it would have been epic,
Hmm.
but him and Ben decided not to because it would have meant that they became dark overlords. Like no, he
Yeah.
just he just lost the lightsaber battle, dude.
Yeah. I never liked that idea that Obi-Wan, and I guess this is probably because they didn't know what prequel Jedi were going to be like, but I don't necessarily like the idea that Obi-Wan was hiding because for any other reason other than he thought that was what was best for Luke and the Jedi as a whole. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know if I like the idea of Obi-Wan's just hiding so he doesn't go to the dark side and,
Yeah.
you know, slay everybody. Like, yeah.
Yeah, I like it as a premise. I don't like the general
Hmm.
premise of what the light versus dark means there. I definitely don't like the way it gets applied in some of the books that are just trying to find an explanation for why Yoda and Obi-Wan don't just fuck everyone up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you want to give our ratings and then maybe do some of the questions?
Yeah.
Unless there's
I'm not
another
sure.
topic
I
for
was. Just take a look at my. I'll read some of my notes. I've got Cathal, Clone Wars, Shada, Suicidal. I really like the character of Shada, by the way. I wish
Mhm.
she was used more. Same with Miranda. Or what's her name again?
The one on Bothawai?
Yeah,
I don't know
it's
the order
Miranda,
that
isn't it? Isn't it
it's
Miranda
Miranda.
Savage?
I think it's Miranda.
Okay,
Something, yeah.
because
Can't remember.
that's what they call that. He calls her Miranda Savage. I'm like, that's a very human name, Earth human. I liked her and Shada. I know
Yeah.
Shada gets a bit of play later on, but I don't think Miranda does. But so I got that. I've got Mara slapping down EU authors, Search Order, Kinman Doriana. Oh, sleeper groups. I would have liked to see the sleeper groups play more of a role during the Yuuzhan Vong War, considering it's kind
Yeah.
of hinted that that's part of the reason why they're there.
Yeah, it's too bad that those didn't get a mention at all.
Hmm.
You get kind of the hint in the Yuzon Vong War at some Thrawn stuff of like that there might be a Thrawn clone out there somewhere.
Hmm.
But a lot of these points that would have been pretty interesting, especially when you get to the Force Heretic
Hmm.
trilogy, where Han and Leia are kind of going throughout this disconnected galaxy where the Vong have basically won, trying to unite these disparate elements. Because like they go to Bakura, they go to talk to the Yavitha, but there's not really much of a mention of these kind of like grassroots elements of there are some, but not the same kind
Even
of
the Empire of the Hand
inspiration
gets
elements.
underplayed,
Yeah,
really.
they get
And
the fighter squadron.
yeah, it's kind of a shame because they're. I mean, I think even sometimes they just get called the Chiss too, or
Yeah,
like they're conflated with the Chiss when they're not the same thing. And they actually gives a very good overview of the difference in this novel, where it's like the
yeah,
Chiss pretend we don't exist, but they also send us 1,000 new soldiers to
yeah.
train every day.
And like
Um,
it does get kind of fixed later, where it's like, oh, the Empire of the Hand can reveal itself at any time when it needs to.
mhm.
But and that
It's like the galaxy got pretty fucked. Like they burned
yeah,
Coruscant. Like, what were y'all doing?
yeah, and especially with like the Chiss, like even if the Chiss elements of the Empire of the Hand join the Chiss again, and even if the Chiss are willing to let like Soontir and the other Imperial elements join, they're not
Mhm.
about to take responsibility for what is it like 300 other sectors of aliens that they want nothing to do with.
Mhm.
That's not how the Chiss operate. So that confederation still has to exist in some form without them.
Totally. Yep. Totally. Yeah, that was I think all of my points. Let me just double check. Randomly punches woman was my last note, so I think I'm good.
Yep. Yeah, I think covered all my stuff as well. So, do you have an arbitrary and reductive letter grade that you would like to give this book?
I may give it an S just because I really like the whole duology as
Okay.
a whole, and I think this one did a good job of wrapping it up. There were things I didn't like, but I think it's S tier for me.
I actually liked Spectre of the Past more than it, I think.
Hmm.
Uh I think I'm gonna leave both of them on A right now, but one of them might get moved up to S when we do our next run through.
Fair
So
enough.
this is an A.
Fair enough.
Uh, do you want to try to get through some emails,
Yeah,
or do you
we
want to
still
deal
have.
with them all with Union? Because it's going to be shorter. It's just a comic, and it's kind of an
Yeah,
extension of this.
maybe that's not a bad idea. So we'll take any questions you guys have when we do Union, and they are related. They are short, so yeah,
Yeah.
feel
So
free to. I was gonna say, feel free to. If you haven't sent us your email about this book, you can do so now.
yeah. I guess a quick reminder for the next few episodes. Then next week we are going to be talking about Union. The week after that, we're going to be continuing the Zan with Survivor's Quest. Week after that, we will be doing a peer Q&A episode. So keep on submitting stuff for that, or like ideally wait until the week before so we have it all a bit more organized because we're lazy. But that should be, I think, March 10th, which will mean on March 17th, we will be doing Vector Prime with our good friend Ilkin from Kings and Generals to start off the
Have we
NJO on
asked
episode
him?
100. Yeah, I've been talking to him.
Okay. Okay. Sick. Sick.
So I do need to make sure I confirm the date with him when we're a bit closer because we're still 4 episodes
Hmm.
out.
We could miss a day or something.
Yeah, but we're definitely going to plan around. Like if we have to change the date to make it work better for him, then I'd rather do that than not have him on it, because this has been
Yeah,
like
agreed.
a year of planning to have him on that episode. So either way, he'll be on the episode. The date might change.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right, so that's going to do it for tonight. Hope you have all enjoyed the podcast. Remember to leave a rating on whichever platforms, or a review even on whichever platforms you listen to podcasts on. In 20 minutes from now, Eck and I will be joined by Charlie to play some Project Zomboid and have some drinks for the Project Zomboid for the first time, not drinking for the first time. We'll be on twitch.tv/x2, youtube.com/x2, and youtube.com/Corey Loses. So all those things are fun.
Yeah. Yeah. So
That's
goodbye,
it.
everybody. Thanks for watching and listening. Make sure you. We'll do we'll do a review of the 5 stars next time too, because we'll have less to talk about.
Yes.
Yeah.
That or on episode 99, we can look through some of our favorite reviews of calling us fence sitters.
Mm-hmm.
We'll go back to the first days of the podcast where we called Luke an incel the first time.